Mukoma and Associates, Sally Mumburi. Oh. So we will expect that all of us will be participatory, we will ask questions, and we will gain as much as we can from our esteemed guests. Thank you. I'd like to yield the floor to the next speaker.
Can you hear me? All right, so good afternoon to all of you. How are you doing? Day 2, are you still vibrant? Are you still looking forward to the remaining 3-4 days? Are you? Did you have something to eat? Yeah, all right, so let's get to it. My name is Cindy Amuka. I am super excited to be back here. About 5 years ago, I was sitting on that side of the podium, or rather the floor. I was a student. My interaction with the All Kenyan Moot Court competition began as a participant, I think in 2015. My team was fortunate enough to win a prize. The next year, I was an organizer, which was a very interesting experience. And now I'm an advocate of the High Court, and I'm back to just, sort of give back outside the student body. And I'm pleased to be here. I hope we have a good time. So our discussion today remains within the theme of the conference, and that's based on electoral law or elections law. But today's, or rather this afternoon's session goes deeper into discussing issues of gender and minority rights within the theme of elections. So gender has become a very fluid sort of term over time, but we understand it mostly to mean male and female. But we also know that with the progress of time, it's just generally come to also include intersex people, yes, and also people who also identify as LGBTQ+. So then in the phase of elections is also a very interesting time. And with Kenya's history, it's not always so peaceful. It requires bodies, institutions, organs, state organs to be very vigilant in those particular moments. And so the thing is, with minority people, with women, the rights are often undermined. And in times of elections, the rights are less adhered to. So that is what we'll be discussing today. Statistics by the Interparliamentary Union data shows that about 23.6% of representation in national parliaments is women. And that is a substantial increase from 10 years ago. That was the 2019 data. From 10 years ago, it is about half of that. So there is progress, but the progress is also still very limited and requires more effort and work. And the most progress has been seen in Nordic states, the likes of New Zealand yes, the likes of New Zealand. And Africa is lagging behind. The one country that's doing something about it is Rwanda. So Kenya has its share of qualms with the issue of the promotion of human rights of these minority people. And we'll start by discussing the history of minority rights in the context of elections. I'm joined by a very capable panel, and so let's start off the discussions. I'll ask Isabel to give us a background, and then we'll proceed. Sorry, we'll start with Sally. Sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Sally Mwamburi from Mukoma and Associates, and I'm really, really happy to be here. I was not supposed to be here. I'll be there tomorrow for you guys, but I'm here now. So to begin, how many of us played a game when we were kids with throwing coin thing? Like heads and tails. Most of us did, right? So how many sides of a coin are there in a coin? Huh? Make sure you're sure when telling me that. When playing that game, how many are there? Actual sides. Okay, let me tell you mine. When I was a kid, we had the third one was called Nyerere, when it stands like this, right? Didn't you have that when you were kids? We did. Yes. So I'm going to take this topic the same way. There are three sides to the election process: the voters, the candidates, and the election body. Both of all three parts are essential in the process. You have to have a voter to have an election. You have to have a candidate for an election, and the one that conducts the elections. So when it comes to women and their rights, women have always been marginalized. When we've always been on the sidelines when it comes to elections. Until recently, women were not allowed to vote or even run for office. It's a new thing for us. Most of you won't understand. Once they were legally allowed to vote, they were deemed incompetent on the face of it. Why? Because women were told, you have to stay in the kitchen, you have to stay and take care of the kids, you have to do everything in the house, while we men go out, while we are your husbands, go out and look for other things. You cannot lead a house. How can you lead a nation? How can you lead a corporation? How can you lead anything? Because they were seen to be weak, to be the weaker gender. However, times have changed. These days, you see women everywhere, very vocal about their rights and everything. Even the government, even the constitution is very, very vocal in ensuring that women's rights to vote and to vie in elections are seen. So, do you know who the first woman to actually vote was? The first woman to vote in the world. The first woman voted in 1647, and her name was Margaret Brant of Maryland. Now, it was different back then. It's not the same right now. Even then, even having the first woman to vote so many centuries ago, we still had issues from 1647 until now. There are still some states that don't allow women to vote. The latest country to actually let women to vote was Saudi Arabia. Guess which year that was? 2015, 5 years ago. Women have gone through a lot of things a lot of issues to reach where they are today. And really, really thank God for our constitution, for our conventions that are out there fighting for our women, for giving civic education to women, allowing the women to be represented. Our moderator has given us statistics on the representation of women in parliament. But in Kenya right now, we all know about the two-third gender rule. However, in reality, in essence, in actuality, despite having 47 guaranteed seats in parliament, in the National Assembly, that only gives us 13.5% of the total 349 seats that have to be occupied. That is so much less than the third that the Constitution has given us, that we are supposed to occupy, because we are told that 2/3 and 1/3, nothing less than that. we've had my colleague here fighting this aspect for years. In the Senate, 18 women in the Senate. That accounts only for 26%. That's not 33.3, because we ought to have 33.3% of women in Parliament. However, that's not the case. So, as history has, we just hope that history will not repeat itself as we continue to learn about women's rights, as women, as our election bodies try and strive, even our courts fight for the rights of women. We go to court to fight these injustices, these disparities that most people do not venture into the law very much to actually put it at par. So as we continue to fight with the women, not with the women, with all these injustices and all these disparities, I would like us to look at the case that actually touched on that matter. My colleague here will delve into it more, but I'd like to talk about it on the surface. It's called the Katiba Institute petition number 19 of 2017, that talked about the gender parity in the nomination process. You know how even in the nomination process, political parties cannot nominate candidates like same gender. The 2/3 rule also applies in the nomination of candidates in political parties. So this 2/3 gender rule does not only apply with the Senate, with the national government, it applies everywhere. We see everything, we see everyone, we see every organization, we see every house, every organization in essence that has to look at this, has to internalize and ensure that their leadership, their managerial staff, their mid staff, and even their subordinate staff, everyone is represented equally. And by equally, we actually mean equally. It doesn't mean today, there was no one to represent the women today. So what? Right? So with that said, I'd like my colleague to take it over and to talk about the rest.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. If I don't get a proper response, I'll say this until for good afternoon. My name is Isabella Mwangi. I work with an organization known as Center for Rights, Education and Awareness. I've just learned that a few of you are currently in our program where we take on students from the university and help them exercise what you guys are currently learning in school into real life experiences. So my conversation is going. Is this the one I had? So my full. Hello. Okay. Let me. So what will expand the conversation she has just started, which we are going to look at the progress of Kenya and the litigation journey that CRU has had in terms of litigating on the issues of 2/3. And then I will touch a little bit on having elections in the midst of a pandemic, how that will look like and how that impacts on gender and especially the minority in the society. So where do we even get this conversation today is of, I'm sure you all know, where do we get the for that? Where is it enshrined? It's in there, not the Bible. Absolutely, the Constitution of Kenya that lays emphasis on equality. And the Constitution then went on further to then even inform on how equality looks like. And it talked about affirmative action. And that is how the issue of women reps and the 2/3 representation came to be. Chapter 2 of our Constitution is very clear about any ratification of international instruments then becomes also the law of the land, right? And so we also are guided by what we call the Bible of the Women Rights, which is the Maputo Protocol. Have you heard of Maputo Protocol? Yes? Which article talks about participation of women in political spaces? Article? I will allow you to be the good students that you are and go and check which particular article of the Maputo Protocol talks about that. And so having that in mind, and Kenya also currently, the current government is very pro-women, is very interested to, at least for the last 10 years, the government has really wanted to ensure that women are in positions or spaces that are influential. So when devolution came into play, we did our elections and the results came out. And then we quickly realized as an organization that the 2/3 adherence had not been arrived at. And we decided to be cordial citizens and went and asked the speaker, what is happening? Why are we in this situation? And the speaker said, I really can't tell you why we're in this situation, but yeah, you go to court and let them give us an opinion on how the 2/3 should be established. How do we attain the 2/3? And of course, so we went to court in 2012 where there was an advisory opinion on how that looks like. Were you guys in school then? Were you born in 2012? No, I kid. So we did have an advisory opinion where the Supreme Court was then told to come and tell us how this should be attained. And at that point, it wasn't unanimous. There was a dissent from Mutunga, but the other SOC judges were of the opinion it is in the Constitution, and so we should be able to enforce the law and it should be enacted accordingly. Mutunga dissented and said, yes, I see how this can be done, but it should be attained progressively, but we shouldn't just be pushing for the 2/3, we should actually be pushing for 50-50. And he left it at that. And of course, the speaker was served and nothing happened for a while. Then, of course, we went back to court. And this time when we went back to court, we were amicus. Katiba Institute also did an advisory opinion on the same. FIDA, NGEC, a lot of women rights organizations came out to be able to understand what does that mean? What does progressive realization of the 2/3 mean? And to date, as you can see, based on the statistics Sally has given you, we are still in the same predicament. So in all these petitions, the court has always been in our favor. I will not go through all of them, but I would want you to kindly go look at the following matter. The Gender Representation Supreme Court Advisory. Kindly Google that one and be able to read. Then look at the FIDA and others versus Attorney General. Then also look at NGEC versus IEBC, because each of them were talking about something. So for example, on the FIDA, it was challenging the gender composition of the Supreme Court. Have you seen a change in that right now? Position of the Supreme Court? Is there a change? What is the change? What is the change? I'm gender bado Supreme Court. TV siku hizi tu ni ya kuona Netflix. So at least we can be able to say rightfully, Sally, right, that from the president to the deputy to the registrar, they are all women, which is a good reflection. And also we as women who are lawyers, we draw our inspiration from that, yeah, to know that one day we can be there. So there was also Then lastly, the last matter you should be able to go and look into is the crew versus Attorney General seeking publication of a bill to give effect to Article 100. And I'm sure you're familiar, Article 100 is where we draw inspiration on issues of 2/3. So while this conversation was happening in court and all these advisory opinions were being given, the parliament decided they're going to start doing bills. And so there was the most famous one, the Duale bill. Have you ever heard of the Duale bill? So the Duale bill sought to amend Article 97 and 98 of the Constitution, and basically said that special seats would be determined after declarations of the general elections. So he wasn't giving us a remedy as such. He was trying to circumvent what the law is saying by saying, okay, let's do this. Let's first tupige kura, and then matokeo yakitokea tuone vile itafanyika. Isn't that what we are currently doing when we give women and youth special seats? Isn't that the practice right now? And then there was which of course that bill was never passed. And then there was the Moot bill. It sought to reduce the number of constituencies to 141 from the current to 90 and set the number of counties at 10. So that way, if they reduce constituencies and then set the number of counties, that way we can be able to get women. Do you think that would have worked? By reduction of the number of sizes. And then we had the Chepkonga bill that sought to define implementation of the 2/3 by inserting. So what Chepkonga actually said is, if the problem is the framing of the Constitution, that we go back and reframe it and put the word progressive. Just add the word progressive before that statement, and then that cures the whole problem. Do you think that works? I just come and just add the word Mrs. before my name. Does that change anything about me? If we just add the word PhD before, does that change who you are as a character? Yes, so that was a problem of these bills. And so to date, as we speak, from 1963, the highest number of women who have been nominated in parliament has been 8 women out of 349. And then the highest number of elected women has been 23 to date. As you can see, the journey is we're still so far from that, right? And so one of the things that we need to is, there are a lot of myths and misconceptions that go around on when women are in position. And there was also that popular myth of, if we add more women, it takes our wage bill high. We need to be able to familiarize ourselves with some of these myths and misconceptions and be able to understand what it does to the society. Why, when you go to talk to your grandmother about voting in more women, why it is not, why for her it's a no-no? What is it about culture? What is it about our religion, our beliefs and our practices that we have against women? Now, to even this gap of women being able to participate in their political right, we will be holding the election during a pandemic. Or you guys think it has gone? Has a pandemic gone because tuliambiwa tuache kuvaa mask? So even for my colleague, I see Palu is online. What happened is in the year 2020, just when the pandemic had hit, around about 20 countries were about to go to do election that year. And if you can recall, 2020 is where everything stopped. The world literally stopped and nothing was happening. And so there was the question of, should countries postpone their elections or should they go ahead and do the election? That was taken to the African Commission by Palu, so I will allow her to be able to discuss it. But for me, the background is this. Countries that went on ahead and did elections, what happened thereafter, the most impacted ended up being the women, the youth, and the children in the country. Case in point, Ethiopia. Ethiopia decided they are going to postpone the election, and they did not do any consultation. And so the region of Tigray is currently in disarray. They're in total turmoil as we speak. And to date, about 1 million people have been displaced just because of elections. In countries like Malawi, despite concerns of electoral harassment, they still and conducted the elections. And shockingly, the incumbent was defeated. And now they have a new government. In places like Cote d'Ivoire, the government, the president decided he's going to serve a third term, just like that. Like, forget even telling you when we are doing these elections, I am serving a third term. Countries, this was very important. In a country like, was it Benin? We are doing our elections. So citizens, be ready, be ready. Us guys are good, we are good to go. So they were prepared. And they said, as we continue, yeah, it looks like it's a much better. So as we continue to prepare, you know that during an election year, there are always observers who come into the country, right? International and local and regional observers. So they said, oh, we don't want international observers. We don't want you guys to bring for us COVID. Rightfully so. Maybe COVID was actually more there than in Africa at that point. Then 12 days just before they went to the ballot box. So they've said they don't want international observers. They only want the East African community observers, yeah? So 12 days just before they went into elections, they sent out communication and said, oh, and by the way, EAC, as you prepare to come, please note that you will need to do a COVID test and you will need to quarantine for 2 weeks. Were they going to observe anything? If I come to your country 3 days even before the elections and I need to quarantine for 2 weeks, is it of any benefit? And so those are some of the things that even us as Kenya, we have to start thinking about what is the repercussion when things are in disarray. Of course, one of the things will be political parties, all those who want to be candidates. How will that reflect on them? Men, women, but more so women. Is the playing field going to be level for them? Are you going to be so worried that there's going to be a public health issue? You are the breadwinner and you need to be home with your kids vis-a-vis how men will feel about this. It's also going to be the issue of voter intimidation. It's going to be the issue of certain parts of the countries being cordoned off, lockdown, because it will be stated that that part of the country has more COVID than others. It will also be the issue of access to information. What happens to access to information when it's a time where there's a pandemic and then there's election? Certain parts of the country might not get the correct information. And if you're currently keeping up to date with what's happening in Ukraine, are you keeping to date with what's happening in Ukraine? Or it's too far from us? Not our issues. Ukraine have been shut down completely. And I read somewhere today, I think on the BBC, that David Beckham has handed over his Instagram or Twitter handle to a doctor in Ukraine for purposes of information. And Beckham has over 70 million, what are they called? Followers, 70 million followers. So he has just taken his account, told this Ukraine doctor, because you have no access to any information here, you go ahead and tell us what's happening in Ukraine. So these are the things that when a part of the society is closed off from that, women, youth, children, then what happens? People continue addressing the agenda that is not of interest to the whole community. And so even as we are currently thinking of going to elections, I think the question for us should be, and the youth going to be disadvantaged at this point in time? If we're in a COVID era and there's no money, and remember the previous speakers spoke about campaign money, where do they get this money from for them to hold campaigns? It is also women being denied and the youth their rights to exercise their political rights. And ultimately, depending on how this election turns out, it might lead to human rights violations. It might lead to a lot of civil unrest. It might lead to civil society being curtailed. And as Mahandia, I think, is one who had mentioned the role of civil society. Ours is to fill in the gap. And so if we are curtailed to the extent where we cannot reach out to the disadvantaged, who then helps these people? And I think lastly, it's also the lack of inclusivity, where we should be very clear in our minds that right now, this country, women and men, we are almost half. So when one half of the society is aggrieved, do we still call ourselves a democratic country? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Sally. Those are very valid thoughts to have on the agenda, on the issue. So essentially to just cap it off, we have the laws, we have the policy, and they're all good really, and they align even with international standards, but the issue is implementation. And we've even had further bills being placed in Parliament that we've learned about: the Duale bill, the Mutamo bill, the Chepkonga bill, but they're not addressing the real issue, or rather they are trying to be shortcuts or rather roundabout methods to address the issue. So then we also have Palu, and we also have Praise God. Maybe we'll have Praise God just share something before we move to Palu. Oh, thank you. Praise God is Palu. Thank you. So go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It has been a lovely conversation from the previous speakers. Well, most have said, as the first speaker said, that when the minority, women are mostly undermined, even in the normal circumstance, there's a lot of discrimination. But then in situation of elections, things get worse. Women's rights are mostly affected. But then now I'll look at not only the normal circumstance of election, now we turn when there is a pandemic, say it COVID-19. If just in the normal circumstance things goes astray, what about a situation now the pandemic is available, where we know most of the time during pandemic, a lot of rights are violated during elections. As the previous speaker spoke, stated that during election, most of existing rights are violated on basis of that there is existence of pandemic. As they said, Palu, specifically, we filed an advisory opinion at the African Court on Human and People's Rights, specifically requiring the African Court to give us an opinion as to how elections should be conducted during a pandemic, taking into account of two facts: either should elections be conducted during a pandemic, and second, if elections are not conducted, when there is postponing of elections, what should be the procedure, or what should be undertaken to ensure that all existing rights within our laws, national laws, within our international instruments, our regional instruments, are upheld. So those are the two areas that we had taken our case to be determined by the court, or to give an opinion by the court, where when looking first at when elections are conducted during pandemic, the court looked at all avenues and said where a pandemic arose in a nation, specifically the current situation where COVID-19 arose in the world, most countries, others said that they'll postpone the elections, but other countries were ready to conduct the elections. But through the opinion, the court said, when a country intends to conduct their election during the pandemic, certain rights have been seen to be limited, be it freedom of movement on the grounds that there is pandemic, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, or the right to effectively participate in the election during campaigns. We have seen that most countries during campaigns, they were limited, saying that gatherings are not allowed. There is COVID-19. So all these are measures that states say that we are limiting, not because we want to infringe people's right to participate in election, but then because there is COVID-19. So what the court said, yes, we understand measures should be taken to promote right to life of the citizens. But when these measures have to be taken, different principles or different criteria have to be observed. And the court said that when you limit different rights on the basis of protecting the right to life, like principle of legality, the principle of non-discrimination, all these things have to be attained on proportionality tests. When you limit the right to campaign on basis of COVID, are the limits you're taking met the proportionality test? The measures you're taking to limit, is it proportional? Is it only for the opposition party that they cannot do their campaign? Or is it all political parties cannot do their campaign? Or if you're limiting them to not do their campaign, which other measures or which other means have you kept that will enable the citizens, the public, to participate in that election? Is there online campaigning? Can citizens participate virtually in all the campaigns, all the elections that are proceeding in the election in the country? So the court set out some principles such as the proportionality test and stated that in the decision that we understand during a pandemic, strict measures will be undertaken to promote different rights. But the one test that countries has to follow is the proportionality test. So during doing these restrictions in ensuring to promote the right of citizens to participate in the government affairs, the proportionality test has to be maintained. So in looking at this test and looking back at the countries that did elections during COVID-19, is for us now to look and go back and see, did they really meet the proportionality test? Did the measures taken by different countries during the elections in COVID period, did they meet the opinion of the court? That question, I leave it to you to reflect and see how far they met the proportionality test, be it restricting campaigning, be it restricting the observers, as the previous speaker said. There are some who restricted observers in international observers, but left alone, they invited the EAC observers, but still gave them a limit or an infringement of movement. Because when you come, you quarantine, that's infringement of freedom of movement. So has that met really the proportionality test the court had set for as an opinion during holding election in pandemic? But further, the second issue was, okay, the country has viewed the pandemic state, the COVID-19, as a threat to its citizens and has decided to postpone elections. What are the measures or what are the steps the state should have undertaken to ensure that they don't infringe the existing rights in their national laws, international laws, and regional laws on issues of promoting citizens' participation in the affairs of the government through elections? So the first issue the court said is, during a postponement of election, there are two aspects. An election can be postponed, but the term of the existing government has not elapsed. Let's take an example, be it Kenya. If it had postponed its election and said, we won't do it in November, but we'll do it in December. But during the postponement of the election, the sitting government was supposed to end in December. So that postponement has not affected the term of the existing government. That's one circumstance. But the court said there's the second circumstance where when they postponed the election to another month or 2 months later, the existing government have lapsed its duration as sitting government. What measures or what law exists then to protect the country during that period where it's waiting for election while the existing government no longer has legal status to be the existing government? So the court stated that when such a situation occurs where the existing government has no legal standard to be there till the next proposed date of election, they should be, one of the basic requirements is the country should enact a domestic law that will identify during that period of waiting for election who will be the existing government, who will sit to represent the needs of the citizens, since our existing government is no longer legal or no longer at service, since it has already lapsed its period of legal standard. So one of the requirements is that the domestic law should define the conditions for postponing the election. So where the law is enacted, it should provide clear requirements, clear conditions that we are postponing the election, but during this time while we're waiting to conduct our election, while waiting the pandemic to cease, this will either will have a committee or either the existing government will proceed, but the law should be there. First, there should be a law to identify that the existing country is going to postpone that election. But also that law should provide what the regime applicable will sit. Will it be an interim regime? What will we call the existing government that is waiting? Is it an interim one? It should have a name. It should have a name through an existing law. But lastly, they said that law should be a general law that will be applicable during that particular time. So with this, the court said when a state just postpones an election on basis of pandemic without developing a general law or a domestic law that has authorized, that has allowed the postponement of election, it's actually infringing the people's rights according to the International Instrument on Human and People's Rights, because it has infringed its citizens the right to participate in free election. And this is commonly because most of our countries, we have the regular elections, and citizens have rights to ensure that after a specific period, be it 5 years, elections are conducted so that we get a new government or a continuous government that is a government of the people. So the postponement of election without clear guidance through law, the court has termed it as it will infringe the rights of its citizens. So now it's to look back again as the first issue. Among Africa, most countries, some of them had postponed election on basis of pandemic. Looking at the opinion by the court, we can now reflect, have they infringed the rights of its citizens or have they not? Those were the two areas that the court had looked at during providing the opinion. So when we see that all that discussion, now we narrow it down to the issue of gender. During the pandemic, the court said there are a lot of rights which are usually violated: freedom of participation, discrimination, freedom of movement, freedom of association. Now looking back at gender, we the minorities, we women, how are we protected during the pandemic? What part should women take during such a pandemic? And one of the important part is taking participation of not only one side, but ensuring to involve the whole citizens when deciding different matters during pandemic. If a law is intended to be enacted on basis of we intend to postpone our election because of a pandemic, then that law should have the contribution of all its citizens, there should be a representation of everyone, and the minority should also be taken into consideration when taking recommendation on the specific law. And if then we are not postponing our election, we are holding our election in the vim of the pandemic, have we taken into consideration the minority groups and how they'll be able to effectively participate in the election? Let's say we have decided to do, because there is a pandemic, we are doing virtually our campaigns. Have we taken into consideration all the existing minorities in our country? How will they be able to participate in that particular campaigns? So this is something that we need to think, and how we are going to include everyone during such a pandemic, and ensuring that we get the government that is the government for the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pray. Thank you so very much. I think that was very informative. I didn't know the depth of that advisory opinion. And just listening to it, I feel like it's acting retroactively. And I can't help but think that there's a lot of legislation, a lot of litigation and case law that goes to cover, scenarios that have already happened. And I always wonder the weight that such kind of litigation or even legislation carries. Does it give us the opportunity to look back and think we should have known better and done better? Or also does it, just give us also the morale to do better in the future? So are we doing preventative control, or are we being, innovative and initiative taking and just trying to curb incidences before they happen? So talking about that, we want to also move on to recommendations, just on the premise of, just covering the scenarios. I want to ask the panelists to cover certain recommendations, when you think about these incidences of gender violence or just breach of rights in the context of elections. What recommendations do our institutions, do individuals pose in this context? I'll begin with Sally, and then we'll move on to Isabel, and then we'll bounce back to Praise God.
The first recommendation I'd give would be civic education. Civic education could be all-encompassing. We could educate the people on their voters' rights, because most of us don't even understand that it's actually important to go out and vote. We say that bad leaders are chosen by good people that don't vote. So that would be the first thing that we would do. In the same spirit of civic education, you would educate people on, we'd actually tell them to vibe. Like, we are young people here. Most of us are, all of us are, we are young people. So we need young, vibrant leaders that are not afraid to go out there and speak their minds, represent their people, actually know what the people need, and represent it to the people, to the people who would listen, and they would be the voice of their people. Because most of us get scared of going out there. Would see the big politicians and say that politics is not for me, and yet here you are. Tomorrow you're going to take part in Moot Court, tomorrow, the day after, and the day after, and in a year or two, you could be a leader somewhere. You could represent someone. You could be in 5 years, the next elections, we could be voting for you for presidency. Who knows? The other thing would be to educate people on on capacity building. Capacity building, my colleague here will talk about capacity building, but most of us don't even know what capacity building is, where to get it, what it entails, and all that. Because some of these things, something like this could really, really help a woman out there, a marginalized person out there can find. There are centers that actually offer capacity building. You know what you want to do. You go to these centers and they help you through all this. Civic education is very, very all-encompassing. The other recommendation I would give would be for the what is it called? The electoral bodies. The electoral bodies should include the women, the marginalized people that we are talking about here. They should feel represented even in the decision making of the people that conduct these elections. When decisions are made behind closed doors, these people should be represented. Even it's not about out here being the voter, being the candidate. No, representation should happen even behind the door, in the boardrooms, what praise God was. There, women should be represented there. The marginalized should also be represented there.
All right, let me just pick up from the capacity building aspect. So this approach is where one, the capacity building in the community, as just Asha's rightly put it, be able to inform them of their duty to exercise their political rights. We're able to help them understand the election cycle. We will help them understand when choosing a leader what that entails and who in your opinion is a leader, because there's some communities where women are not even allowed to still vote in this country. Or if they do go and vote, yes, they're still not allowed. Or if they do go and vote, it is the opinion of their husband, the opinion of their father, what their brother said. And so in as much as you're going to see women in the line, what they're doing is basically what they have been told to do by patriarchy. Then the second type of capacity building is where we are also looking into capacity building women aspirants in being able again to understand what elections entails, what legislation entails, how to be able to frame their agenda. And when they're framing the agenda, I must say we are also being a bit biased into the agenda, looking into more of women and girls issues and children, and being able to expand the issues to reflect a community that is progressive. And that's what capacity building looks like. In terms of recommendations for me is we must be able to own our agenda. We must be able to frame our agenda as women and be able to demystify some of the myths that are happening. For example, if we'll just do a quick, by show of hands, how many think women rep seat is relevant? Yeah, I wanted to say null and void. Is relevant, but just show of hands, don't worry, just tell me, women rep seat, next election, if you are to go to Machungwa and what was it, banana and orange now, how many would say women rep to be script? Show of hands. Msiogope? Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you. Guys, don't fear. And on this side, you guys are happy with Timothy, women rep seat? No, we are not scraping women rep seat? No, don't pause for women now. Don't pause for us now. We are good. Okay, rightfully so. And I tell you this, you're not the only ones. Actually, a survey was done where majority, and by majority, I actually mean us women, we have the opinion the women rep seat should be scrapped. Of course, men are behind this agenda. And this is why, It's true. And this is why, one, the terminology flower girls, have you heard it? It has been used to refer to who? To who? Flower girls, who are called flower girls? See, it's women reps. But as guys, when we were growing up and even now, we know flower girls play a very particular role, isn't it? In weddings, in occasions, flower girls have a very ceremonial. And so when we start putting such terminologies to legislators that your work is just to be flower girls, you see, then it depreciates the role these women play in society, isn't it? So these are the things that we need to start changing. And that's why I'm saying we need to own our narrative and need to start changing such narratives. The 47 women reps, they might not have done anything for you, but there are communities where they have truly transformed the lives of people. We might not be able to know that. But the minute they come here and then it's a whole flower girl affair, even you in school and even when you start practicing or you come to this other side, you'll always have that notion, women reps are who? Flower girls. In fact, when they were passing the second Dwale bill, it is alleged that that day, you know how bills are, yes, of course you know how bills are passed. You would not have made it through first year or even a history class if you didn't know. So the day they were supposed to vote, it is alleged that all the women who sit in parliament were absent. It is further alleged that on that particular day, all those women were at the tribe at the spa. Who paid for that spa? Men. Oh, nani anaenda kutoa pesa yake kwenda tribe? Mimi. See, a man somewhere is paying for this. So those types of narratives is what, one, we need to demystify. That women, we are not always trying to fight each other. We truly, we aren't, and we tend to be friends. But also when women are in leadership positions, we should be able to see how best to be able to support them. In terms of the 2/3 gender rule, to be honest, as a person, I have no opinion about it. Like how to resolve, I truly don't. What I know is this, we can't continue going to court. That is not the resolution for this. Court is not a remedy anymore. They have always been in our favor. And if you recall the last advisory or for Maraga told the president to do what? To dissolve parliament. And it was left at that. So what else are we looking for in terms of legal? I think now it's time to be able to educate the masses what 2/3 means and slowly allow them, the societies or citizens to be able to arrive progressively to the 2/3 by themselves. The same way certain social norms were demystified in this country, such as circumcision, there are communities where they did not have to go and do a very hard declaration, stop this, but they sensitize the community and allow them to arrive at their own decision. Again, it's also being able to provide a conducive environment for both male and female, especially when it's an electoral time. Let's have a level playground. Let women be able to go and sell their manifesto easily without any level of harassment or use of words that are derogatory, just the same way we accord men that type of respect. And lastly, for me, and this is a big one, is if we happen to go into a rerun, just like we did in the year 2017, we must have safeguarding mechanisms for the minority in this society, because those were the ones who are most afflicted. A lot of people, especially depending on where you come from, by the time you realize that the country was almost burning, it was 3-4 days later. You guys wouldn't know, maybe you might have were a bit younger, in 2007, not the previous one. In 2007, when we had very serious election issues, 2007, people did not realize the country was burning until a few days later. So we were caught flat-footed, and a lot of things happened. A lot of human rights violations happened. And so for us, now that we know we have a history, there is a possibilities. The parties, and if this is being recorded, please, you'll bear that part. I have taken the power of, but the parties that are also currently running are the same people who were there in 2007. And so being cognizant of that, we must be able to anticipate some of these issues. So let's have safeguards so that the minority especially where people are not going to, what is it called? Agree with the results of the elections. Let's ensure that we are able to protect the minorities in the society. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we are a room full of lawyers, right? So we're able to, just go back and forth on various ideas. We'd covered a lot of ground and moved on to recommendations, but I had overlooked two of our colleagues, that is Miss Evelyn and Miss Esther from Palu, and they're joining us online. I'd like to open the floor to them to just share their opinions on any areas, and then we'll finalize with all three Palu panelists on recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Praise had said most of what I wanted to say, but just to add on to what she's the comment that was made. I don't actually think that, to add on to the issue of the advisory opinion, I actually think it was forward thinking, to be honest. Because when you look at 2021 and 2022, there are many countries that are coming up for election. And even looking at 2022 alone, there are at least 20 countries that are coming up for election. And I think it was important, considering the pandemic is here to stay, it is not going away. And there'll be another variant as time comes. So it was important to be forward looking in the sense that we have a guideline that guides people on how to hold these elections. Looking at the fact that obviously this is Africa, we have many countries, many governments, our governments are using the lockdown, are using the pandemic as a way to now circumvent their responsibility to hold credible elections. So in a way, we just, we said, okay, we need to have a guideline and we need to get a credible institution to provide this guideline. So just to respond to you, it was forward thinking. And I actually don't think it was, it's not going to have a retroactive effect. It's going to apply from now moving forward. And I think it was, it's also not an afterthought. It's actually more forward thinking, looking at the new world as it is now and what we have and what we're facing, considering we're going to be facing the pandemic as we continue. So in a way, that's what we wanted to do. It was a way of getting credible elections, obviously in line with ACDEC and the African Charter, just to hold states accountable. That yes, we have the pandemic, but how are you going to hold these elections? Hold them in a credible and reliable manner. And if you do not, we will hold you accountable, be it at national, regional, or continental level. Thank you. I'm Evelyn. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Evelyn from Palu. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you so much. Might we also have Esther's input, kindly?
Oh, sorry, Esther is no longer with us. She has just stepped out. Yes.
That's all right. So we'll hear your recommendations.
All right. Well, as most speakers have said, but the major recommendation I can make is how we as citizens have the majority role to play during elections in ensuring that we have a free and a fair election. The existing, sorry, just a minute. Sorry about that. As I was saying, the role in ensuring a free and fair election starts with us citizens. What are we playing to ensure that we speak out to ensure the minority rights, the women's rights are included, are heard, and how are we going to ensure to promote women's participation in our parliaments, in different political positions? So I believe as citizens, but also different CSOs organizations, it's time for us to speak out, identify different areas that we feel are a shortcoming in our countries. In Kenya, what are the shortcomings, the 2/3? How are we going to improve? As the dissenting judge said about progressive, but don't we feel there's no need of progressing again? It's time now. Women are set in the position. Women exist in the political sphere. I believe when we can only do that, it's if all citizens come together and speak about it and not wait and say that it's something that is progressive in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. I believe it's now to ensure inclusion of all groups in the political sphere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, praise God. So we'll have questions from the floor. All right, so we'll start with Timothy, and then we'll have her and him and you.
Thank you very much. Mine is not really a question, but a comment. And I'll go straight into the 2/3 gender rule and I think what has been espoused. And I like what you said. It's not really about, the courts are not really a system that we can run to based on the jurisprudence that has come out from court. We have high court petitions that were filed to support 2/3 gender rule. We went to the Supreme Court advisory opinion that said, even though we're not required to realize it progressively, as at the time we were holding the 2017 elections, there needed to have been a bill before Parliament taken by the Attorney General to ensure that there's inclusivity of women. That's the first thing. And then we go to September of 2020, and it gets to the point where Maraga issues a press conference saying, you know what, the 11th Parliament, illegal. 12th Parliament, illegal. All of them, why? Because they have not adhered to the 2/3 gender rule. And the question begs, I'm writing a thesis for my LLM, which I have not started yet, but I know I'll start, on the 2/3 gender rule. And I'll probably be exploring what, in essence, would be an alternative to the court system for implementing the 2/3 gender rule. I think what I can point out from across the divide from the jurisprudence that has come out from the court, including the advisory that was given by the former Chief Justice, is there's just no political goodwill to implement the 2/3 gender rule. It's as plain as simple as that. There's no goodwill. There's no one who is sitting where they are sitting and saying it's time that we implement this 2/3 gender rule. And when you ask the question about, do we think that it's important that the women reps position remain? To me, it's a resounding yes, because I understand the position that these people play at that level of understanding. To many of the people, it might seem as if it was an end to a means, or a means to an end, that we are giving them, we don't want to implement the 2/3 gender rule, but we're going to give you these 47 positions free of charge. Yeah, we have given you here to Mawapatia, you don't have to beg for it, take it. Yeah, which to me, it gets to a point that, as you said, when you degrade that position to that level, then it seems, as correctly the way people are putting it, flower girls. Yeah, but my thinking would be, we might need to deliberately, both as civil society and also government, look into the issue of trying to shape the political goodwill for us to be able to implement the 2/3 gender rule. Multipartism began through a series of courts until it got to a point where Moi realized, I think for history, he realized that we're going into an election, and in this election, I have no chance of winning if I don't include the Muslim community. Yeah. So what I can do to quell that part of history that I might not want to be part of, let me allow, if I can use those words, that multipartism goes through, so that when it comes to when I need them to vote, they'll vote. We achieved multipartism, and it's still until today. So really, I really don't believe there's a hard route that we must follow for us to be able to implement the 2/3 gender rule. But if you can go the political goodwill way, the day we get political goodwill for implementation of the 2/3 gender rule, if the bill was placed in Parliament today, by tomorrow morning, half of the women or half of the representation at the bicameral house will be, as you're saying, 50-50, not just even 2/3, 50-50. But I think it's something that we need to explore in depth in whatever route that we have, because really, creating of more jurisprudence on that area really just adds on to the pile of law that is already existing. Thanks.
My name is Louis from JQuat. So I have 3 questions. 2 are for Ms. Mwangi, but unfortunately the camera is blocking us, but that's okay. Okay. So you've said that women are told by the patriarchy who to vote for. Don't you think there's a line between coercion and influence when you're attempting to influence one's decision on who to vote for? And the second question is, when you talk about participation, electoral participation, since the only thing that can remove the title flower girl from the women rep positions is the on merit basis, it's the only thing that can remove the title flower girl. So currently speaking, we have the same, lots of things are at the same level. We have the same education with women. Lots of women even beat lots of men in education and in business. So what's stopping a lot of the women for vying for the electoral positions? The third question is not very gender-based, but I'll still ask it anyway, since this is the last panel. Seeing as the constitutional principles that relate to the elections are centered around the main idea of casting the ballot into the ballot box, but also bearing in mind that we have a social contract with the government where they protect our rights and our freedoms, and we pay them taxes, and they also protect our security and our property. Do you think that it is wise to let the prison population vote in elections, whereby we have a case where a person vying for electoral office is campaigning on the basis of security, we're going to throw all the criminals into jail, and then do you think that it's really wise for us to give the prison population the right to vote, considering that their interests are averse to our interests, the rest of the society's interests? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Marceline Irungo, and I'd like to raise a concern as well as a question. So one of the greatest writers once said that historically power was coded male, and we need to shift from that point to state that power is coded human. So my question will raise concerns on the implementation of the 2/3 gender role, because most of the people who perpetrate it are looking at it from a perspective of it's women we want in parliament. But are we sitting back and asking ourselves, how about we tell men and women to go to the ground and fight for these positions? Because then we will ensure that the leaders we have is not based on gender, it's based on merit and what they can deliver to the country. So what would be your take on the implementation of the 2/3 gender rule in relation to power is being coded human and it's not based on gender? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Thaya Jesse, and I think mine is more of a comment rather, and sort of stems, or rather touches a bit on what Marceline has shared with regard to the 2/3 gender rule. There's one thing we have been, or there's one thing, rather a concept, one of our lecturers once shared with us, and it's that with regards to the question of the 2/3 gender rule, it's his view that we are probably misdiagnosing the problem, whereby with the current society we have and with the constitution, we're not looking at wanting to have, the problem is not that we're not having more women in active politics, or rather seeking elective seats. The problem is that you can't really go to the individuals and coerce them to take up these positions. It all goes down to individual effort and that personal drive to, realize that there's this point, there's a place where you can make a difference and you can make a change, then go for it. That way, as she had said, it's going to be based on merit, not a question of patriarchy or any sort of bias against women, but rather a question of what are you ready to deliver and what can you do? And I'm pretty sure even in the current setup that we have many women who have significant impacts in different sectors and in different areas where they thrive. And it's not a question of because you're a lady, we'll give you this position. No, it's more of they took up the challenge to address certain issues in a manner which they deemed fit for the setup, or rather the society they were in. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm David Minor from JQuat. My first question, I have 3 questions. My first question, bearing in mind that modern problems require modern solutions, and we have seen countries such as the United States of America, Australia, voting in the pandemic, voting using voting by mail, and this has lowered the rates of COVID-19. What's your take on African countries, the dynamics of politics, and methods such as voting by mail? The second question, the African, Palu did a research on the African Court of Human Rights. I'm not sure about that. And one of the ideas they had was to postpone the voting, sorry. How about postponing the campaigns? Because campaigns involves gathering of many people, and one might contract COVID from there. On to my third question. In the issue of minorities and elections and politics, one thing that we need to note, and one thing that is obvious, is that the people who we regard as minorities are actually the majority. These are women and youth. And as a lover of politics, research shows that women are swing votes. And to win elections, even in the United States of America, you need to have women behind you. There are women who have won elections by huge margin. Salif Johnson from Liberia, 2006. Women supported her, and she won. I think she won by 54% after a runoff. One of the greatest revolutionaries in the world, Napoleon Bonaparte, French. He was a youth, 29 years old, and he revolutionized politics and democracy and everything. So, in your opinion, what's the dynamics of the youth, women, politics, and Kenya? Yeah, thank you.
Hello, my name is Nasiran. I just wanted to say something. Compared to when a man vies for a seat. So that is the mentality that society has. So until society unlearns that mentality, I feel like it is very necessary for us to have that women rep seat until they unlearn that mentality. Yeah, that's all I had to say.
All right, so I think we'll just have those questions for now, address them first, and then if there's time, we'll open the floor again.
I'll start with voting by mail. Okay. I'll start with the implementation of the 2/3 gender rule, where power is based on merit and not gender. I think someone asked that. What I'd say about this is, we've seen women win on merit. We've had Laboso and Waiguru, right? They're governors. They won the elections on their merit. They went out. They fight. I know we might have different opinions about the whole thing, but they went out, vied for the positions, and they won the highest seat in their county. They won the governor's seat. So I think if women came out more, there was a time that women were really encouraged to come out, like in the previous elections, to come out and vie for these seats. Not just women reps, vie for all these, but you'd see women, they would get really scared because of the same mentality, or the same thing that has been ingrained in the society over and over again, that a man is a better leader. A man is, if you stand against a man, you will obviously lose. The men in the society will look at a man vying and so for the sake, people will see two candidates vying for the same seat, and they would always pick the man. It's before the 2010 constitution, we barely saw women in power. The same women have been in power for ages. Karua and Ngilu, they've been in power since in the 1900s. 1990. Sorry, they've been in power for ages, and they're still in power now, and they're still struggling with the same bias. Look at Martha Karua. Most of us like Martha Karua, right? If she stands for presidency right now, how many of us will vote for her? See, many men would vote for her. Where are the women? Or you already swayed with a different vote. Well, it's the same issue. Out there, many people would rather vote for a popular candidate rather than this strong lady or woman or anyone else. That's why most of them actually prefer to deal with the women issues at a woman's rep capacity. In my county is very far from here. It's Kilifi County. So my woman's rep is Gertrude Mbeu, yes. Gertrude Mbeu. She came from far, like her competitor was Esther Kache. Esther Kache, I've seen Esther Kache grow. When I was growing up, I saw her as a councillor, she's been a councillor of that same constituency for as long as I can remember. Yes, and a lot of businesses. She's a very successful woman. When it came to elections, she vied for women's rep also. The women were the first one to lynch her. I saw it personally. I didn't understand. I didn't really get why they hated her so much. But the first thing they said is that amekula pesa zetu nyingi sana, ona hizo nyumba na biashara zake nyingi amezijenga na pesa zetu. But you see, when you look at her manifesto, I'm not against Gertrude or anything. But when I looked at Esther's manifesto, she really touched on the girl child, and even in her endeavors in her constituency, she used to protect the girls. You'd see her protect the little girls, because molestation and all that is very rampant in Kilifi County, as you've read everywhere. And in her constituency, it was also very bad. And during her tenure, it's like people forgot all about that. So personally, I think true, women can run on merit, but out there, people might not see that. That's my answer for that. And voting by mail, I think there was a suggestion on that also sometimes back when Corona was was it a policy or something like that was suggested, that was tabulated to IEBC. But until now, I've not heard much about it after that. I'm not sure it would curb the transmission, all these questions about postponement of elections. That way anyone can do it online, but then there is that issue of network and all those things in the mashinani area. I don't think Kenya is right where we're supposed to be when it comes to online services. That would really cut most people out of the voting sphere. So yeah, I really don't. Okay, those are my thoughts.
Let me just speak from the voting by mail. For me, it's about structures, not resources. Kenya, we are a rich country. It's only that it ends up in specific pockets. But if we truly wanted this to be something that we were able to do, we can be able to resource it. The problem is the structures. A lot of people also don't have PO boxes, as you know, and the last time you got mail, you know, unless it was when you're being admitted and you most likely gave your school address. So for me, it's the structures. My good friend over there, in terms of patriarchy, coercion and influence, positive influence can be we're having a discussion and you give me your thoughts, and you give me the leeway of acting or not acting thereof on that matter, right? But when it comes to voting, what we are seeing is not just influence, it's undue influence, which is very similar to coercion, where there is a lot of intimidation, there is a lot of threats. And as long as in this society, the men are the ones with resources, women will always be influenced on, and undue influence, not just influence, but coerced or undue influence on whom to vote for, especially in the peri-urban and rural areas. Don't think about the urbanites. Urbanites very likely are the ones even going for campaigns. The ones who are koko mashinani, the problem will always be undue influence and coercion, which very similar and leads to intimidation and threats, including sitakupatia pesa ya watoto wa chakula next week. Those are some of the cases we have been able to document when it comes to the power of the woman to vote. In terms of electoral participation for women based on merit, as someone has rightly put it, we are in so many spaces, but are these spaces influential? Are we in influential spaces? That is what we are pushing to be on the big table. You know that song, we want to band down, we want to sit with those big boys. That is what is happening. And this is because women are educated, but statistically, and even you can check in your campuses, we still have a higher number of boys transiting to campus than girls. Have you noted that in your classrooms? No? Yes? Check. We still have a higher number. So you have joined first year, you will still note by the time you're exiting, by the time you're graduating with your LLB, you will still have more men exiting than women. Women, a lot of things happen in between, life happens, and most of them don't exit. So in terms of merit, we are very good, and I don't dispute, we have merit, but by the time it's being recognized, therein lies the problem. Who recognizes the merit of these women? And this is all attributed by the fact that the playing ground is not leveled. This is not the issues of equity versus equality. As long as the playground is disadvantaging one party, you will never see. If today, I mean, a very good example, when all these videos that have been circulating of men having sex rightfully with women, what has the conversation been about? You guys have been focusing on which gender? The women. But then no one goes to ask first who was taking this video, and then secondly, why are we not vilifying the woman the same way we are, the man the same way we are vilifying women? So for us, it's no longer an issue of merit, it's an issue of equity versus equality. That playground is not level for us. No one will ever see our merit. That's the reason why affirmative action is important. First, allow us to be 5 steps ahead. If mkitufikia, well and good. Msipotufikia, deuces. It has been a good run. But more often than not, even those 5 steps ahead, as we have demonstrated since 2010 to date, we have still not managed to catch up. And at the back of your minds, I would want you to be very cognizant of the fact that historical injustices towards females has been there since time immemorial. It's not just in Kenya. It's not a unique issue. It's a global issue. And so because of those historical injustices, there's been a lot of movement building, a lot of initiatives just for women to catch up since we are the other half of this society. When it comes to the issue of prison population voting, I don't know, why do you not want your fellow Kenyan to exercise their rights? They're not dead. They still have, they're human. They just did an offense and they're now paying for it. So we take them to prison for what purpose? See, correctional. It's called a correctional facility for a purpose, right? And so when it comes to voting, I personally think they should be able to exercise their vote. This has nothing to do with the offense that they did. Why women are not taking up political positions? Well, I think my response is just as the same. One, if you know you're going to stand today, a very good case in point is what flawed Kabogo in the year 2017. Do you remember the statement Kabogo said in 2017? What did he say? Absolutely. He's not running it. His opponent was a woman, and he stood into a podium in Kiambu County, where if you check your history, certain ethnic communities in this country are actually matriarchs. That includes people who reside in Kiambu County, and stood up and said, this woman who does not have a husband, how can she run a county? What has a husband got to do with you running a county? This woman who has no children, and means that who has no home, how will she be able to run a county? And that is the reason why Kabogo by the way flawed. Not that he was a bad person, but that one particular statement flawed him completely and he lost. And so if every time you stand in the podium, people are going to say, Isabel, you are a single woman. But when Timothy, who is a philanderer, and people know he's one, when he stands at the podium, people will be like, yeah, huyo ndio mtu tunataka. How, do you see how we cannot control some of this narrative? And so for us, it's not why women are not taking a position. As Sally had said, over time, we are seeing more and more women taking up these positions. And I'm sure if you're keen, you will note this time around, we have so many aspirants, so many women included. I'm waiting to see how the primaries are going to go. But the minute a woman stands, you're vilified, you're reduced. And sometimes it's a matter of choosing peace of mind over this political seat. It's if you are still helping your community in your own way, you continue doing that as opposed to exposing yourself. Not everyone is the Millie or the Ambos and Akina Millicent Omanga who don't mind that every time a video emerges of them, the first thing that people will talk about Millicent Omanga is, yeah, I know you know, I will not say what it is. Even as recent as the last video for the UDA conference, that was the whole, in fact, guys even forgot what the manifesto was about. Guys did a whole chat to discuss her dancing skills. And so it's, I think also us being able also to just work together and coalesce women as voters and as aspirants, and being able just to be impressionable towards the community that women can be able to do this. And then in terms of dynamics of youth, women in politics, what can I say? Politics is dynamic. It has changed, as Timothy tried to give us a brief history. Right now we have democracy, multipartism. That's not what it used to be when we were a bit younger. So when it comes to youth and women, unfortunately, bottom line is food. Bottom line, like when you really unpack this whole issue, it's all about the issue of food. We are seated here today, and even if I asked you today, if any political aspirant right now says, let's go to the streets and fight, are you going to go? Why? You've just eaten a meal right now, right? You know where you're going to get your next meal. So what I'm trying to say in short is this. Politics, the trends of politics change from time to time. And America and the UK have been able to demonstrate that if people like Trump and Boris can be in position, imagine what we cannot do. But let's come down to Kenya. As long as 62% of citizens in this country live below the poverty line, all I need to come and do is tell you, I will feed you today, I will feed you tomorrow, and so you must dance to my tune. That is the problem with this. Not really, but that is the situation we are in. And 62% is a huge number. And even the ones who are not below the poverty line, it's not like they're above it, Sana. They're just over here. Where now this is the middle class and upper middle class, where if we tilt this situation slightly, we are losing our jobs, we are closing our businesses, then that increases the 62%. And it's only about 2% who are in the absolute upper part of the economy. And so bottom line for us is, if you can feed me, I am dancing to you. The Pied Piper, yeah? You remember the Pied Piper? Whoever who plays it, that's the person we are following. So for us, it's the issue of poverty, and then there's also the issue of ideals. I hear when, let me just say men, when they talk about football, you can almost imagine that person, Akeko Koyo Academy, please. Arsenal, you have nothing on Kenyan men playing football. Verbally, yeah? The strategies, is, you know, you guys have had these conversations, isn't it? And so it sounds like such an amazing thing. And so for me, we're able to urge ourselves and the communities we interact with, how then do we then take this conversation and ideologies about our politics? Why do we always think, like if now you've noted, the power dynamics right now is between what and what? What is the power dynamics right now? The two horses between what and what? What and what? Just shout. Sorry, dynasties and hustlers, yes? The weekend, the people who want to protect their dynasties, and that it's by the old money versus new money. Yes, old versus new money. But then why do we think that we need to also help the very rich protect their money and it doesn't come to our pockets? You know, so our ideologies are, again, around politics need to be enhanced, need to be sharpened. And then lastly, there is an element of culture. And this is a conversation we have all had in this room, and Sally has said, where we think a man is a better leader. And because it starts from when we are children. Ukienda kanisa, Sunday school, who is the head of the home from Sunday school? See, it's the man. And so we grow up knowing the head of the home is a man. When you go to class, a class prefect, a man, and then the girl is one like, do you want to be one also? Okay. So that is what is happening. And even during the second session, I was telling my colleagues during lunch, I was very saddened no woman asked a question. I was even further saddened that Timothy and the men all sat here to discuss electoral issues. Where are the women in these spaces? And so even us, the onus is also on us to challenge ourselves. Let's be as confident as the men. Let's want to be able to be on those big tables with the people that are making decisions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll now move to Palu. There's a specific question addressed to Praise God. So you can address that and anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a question asked on postponing campaigns and postponing votes. Well, the issue that was discussed once you postpone election, in general, everything else is postponed. The campaigns are postponed. Everything else is postponed. So what the court said, once a state postpones election, that means everything else has settled, has stopped. So once everything has stopped, it has to provide the clear law as to when it will take place and what are the steps, or when will the campaign resume, when will observers then have to come to the country. So everything else will be provided by them. Because when you just say campaigns, when you just postpone campaigns and have elections, that's already an infringement to individuals' rights, because they won't be able to hear the different political positions. What are they campaigning on? But also they spoke of the issue that there are some countries who intend through discrimination infringe other political, maybe an opposition party from campaigning while they continue to campaign. Such is an infringement of the law. So such is prohibited even when there's pandemic. So all circumstances were discussed and stated that there should be the balance of proportionality test. When you're saying that you're postponing campaigns, but you're still having elections, then is there another way? Was there any measures that could have been done not to infringe that particular right of people to hear the information or to decide on matters? So if at all you're saying you're having elections, but then you have canceled campaigns, why don't, if you are infringing that gathering, saying that when people gather, there'll be a spread of the COVID, then allow virtual campaigns. And if you're allowing virtual campaigns, is your country set up properly to ensure that effective virtual campaignings are done? And looking mostly at our African countries, will the people in the villages get that access to the visual campaigning? All those should be taken into consideration by state before it just decides that we are canceling campaigning because of the pandemic. But also there was an issue raised about voting by email or electronic voting. As my colleague said, I'm also of the opinion, for now, some of the countries have started electronic voting, the e-voting, but others, I believe we are not yet there, because just the existing internet system is still a challenge, or the access to internet is still a challenge for most of our citizens. So when we start the electronic voting, we should ensure that all the existing challenges are already removed, are already determined, whether is it access to internet, whether is it access to the electronic gadgets that will be used. All those things should be taken into consideration before we say that we are entering into electronic voting. Like South Africa in 2021, they wanted to pass a bill to start the electronic voting, but the parliament has not passed the bill, believing of the continuous challenges existing, stating that such a law is not yet practicable to be attained or to be implemented effectively. So yes, I believe the era we are going, we should start implementing electronic voting. But I don't believe currently where we are, most of the African countries, specifically most of East African countries, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, are there yet to start electronic voting. We should first try to remove all the existing challenges before we even think of that. So that whatever we are propagating, whatever we are stating about free and fair election is attained and not curtailed during ensuring electronic voting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know if we have time for another round of questions. Do we? All right, I think we can always, take another one.
Hello. So, Makwata. So, the conversation we've had today has been more about why women need to be there, which we agree, we know women are very important actually. And the conversation has been to why, and we've even talked about how these issues have gone to the Supreme Court. But then my main question will be, now we have the law, the Constitution provides that we need to have at least 2/3 or a third of each gender in each organization, in parliament either. So the main question that I will need you to brainstorm, or if it's just your thought, what do you think is a way that we can implement this 2/3 gender rule? What do you think is a way? Can you come up with any way so that if we decide to come up even with a bill to take to Parliament to discuss, so what do you think is a way that we can actually achieve this 2/3 gender rule?
Mine is just but a concern. I was concerned about, the society has been concerned about the girl child for quite a while. Since the coming of the 2010 Constitution, we have seen tremendous progress in that field. But my concern comes to the other lost side of it. And I think the society has focused much more on the girl child, and it has, to some extent, looking at statistics and looking at the way. An example of a statistic that I can give is the example that you gave, that right now in my class, there are more ladies and guys, and the society seems to be more inclined towards empowering the girl child. And on the other side, what I'm seeing is disempowering the boy child. So the concern is we need a balance, we need equity and equality. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that will be our last question. Sorry, we'll have to close it there. We'll have the 2 questions answered. Yes. All right, so my thoughts are a bit of like a summary of the entire conversation we've been having. And it all points to the fact that, yes, we understand the concept of equity, we understand the concept of equality. And I think the application of these 2 concepts require case-by-case analysis. So one of the participants had, talked about how the more women, or rather more females in classes now, as opposed to men. But I think, Isabel, you aren't agreeing to that statistics. And I do agree. Our reality is constrained to, what is in our immediate environment. So in Nairobi, in the big cities, in Nairobi, in Kisumu, in Mombasa, that might be the case. But what is the case in Narok? What is the case in counties like Migori, Mashinani? What is happening to the girl child? The reality is the girl child is still behind by a margin that is narrower than it was, let's say, 30, 20 years ago, but it is still a margin. So we do need to realize that the application of these principles of equity and equality need to constantly be interchanged as appropriate. It can't be a question of us versus them, men versus women, or the disabled vis-a-vis the abled, where let's say a certain right or accolade to the disabled, puts them at a better place than the abled. So for me, there is no right answer. And that's why we have legislation. That's why we have the courts. We constantly have to keep changing with the times to see, what is the net effect of, going this way as opposed to going that way. There's a particular poem that really appeals to me, The Road Less Taken. And for me, whenever I read it, I can't remember who wrote it, but essentially the net effect of that poem is, if you make a decision A, you'll end up at a point Z because you made A, B, C, D up to Z decision. If you make a decision A1, B2, you'll end up at a position Z2, perhaps. I'm just trying to explain it to you guys in the sense that one decision results in another decision. Yeah. I don't know if the panelists would like to add anything.
Mine is just to say, if truly, Lemayan, I caught your name in the first instance, you believe you and your gender are disenfranchised in any way, form a movement. Form a movement, and then we'll see how we can then work together. Cindy.
Sally, do you have anything to? All right. Praise God. Any closing remarks?
No, I've none, but I just wanted to say the session was a productive session, and I hope all we have gained something in which we'll ensure to implement and ensure an inclusive election. As Kenya is looking forward to election, I hope whatever we have learned, we'll be able to foresee it to be implemented. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Let's have a round of applause to the panelists, to yourself. Thank you so much.
All right, we can give them another round of applause. So thank you so much, Cindy. Thank you so much, Isabel. Thank you so much, Sally, and thank you so much, Praise God. We are honored and humbled for you to have dedicated your time, your expertise, and much more for you just being here today. Now, that not being said, you cannot go unappreciated. So we have a small token of appreciation from the team, and I'd request some of my committee members to assist me in giving out the small token of appreciation. So we can start with Sally. With that, I'll request Janet to come and award Miss Sally. A round of applause, please. Thank you so much, Miss Sally. We are really, really honored for that. Next, we have Miss Isabel. I'd request Christine Onjiku to give you a gift pack. Yes, and then we have our very able former committee member. Her name is Miss Cindy. I'd request Daniel Murakaru to come and give Miss Cindy a small token of appreciation. A round of applause, kindly. Right, and we have still one more panelist. I don't know how we can give her a gift pack at the moment, but I think what we can do, we can just give her a wholeheartedly round of applause. Thank you so much, praise God, for making time to be here with us today. We are grateful, we are honored, and most importantly, we would find a way to get you a gift pack. Yeah. But thank you so much. With that said, I think we can end today's session. But before then, for the teams that will be coming to the Moot Court team tomorrow, the Moot committee has something small to tell you for 5 minutes. Otherwise, other than that, thank you so much for attending today's panel and today's conference. All the best to all the teams. Thank you.